In today's hurried and hectic world, leaders need to make sure that they are rejuvenated and refreshed so that they can face any of the challenges that might come their way. Our next guest has done a tremendous amount of research on the study of microbreaks. Emily Hunter is the professor and department chair of management at Baylor University, and I'm so excited to have her joining the Leadership Puzzle.
I'm your host, Jeff Lupinacci, co-founder of Evolve HR Solutions. In this project, we're taking a journey to uncover the mysteries of leadership with some of the world's most accomplished leaders. In each episode, we discover the distinct insight from each of these great leaders, enabling us to refine our leadership skills and become more effective leaders. Piece by piece, together, we will assemble the leadership puzzle.
Hi, Emily. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Leadership Puzzle. We're really excited to have you here today.
I'm excited, Jeff. Thanks so much for inviting me. This is going to be fun.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I was thinking that we must have met 11 or 12 years ago when I did some classroom guest speaking, I guess, in your class.
Yes, I am so thankful for our relationship, Jeff, over so many years. You have been such a just a wonderful support for our Baylor University students, and you're always loyal to come in every semester and speak to our students and share your wisdom and your experiences. And as Baylor faculty, that's something that we rely upon, right? We need industry professionals coming into the classroom, and you've been one of those just staples for many years. And so I'm so thankful for that.
Yeah, well, it's been great getting to know you and some of the other faculty and staff. Now you're the department chair of the management department, which is super exciting. Now, what falls under your purview in the management department there?
Yeah, so I've been a department chair of the management department in the Hankamer School of Business for 4 years now, and essentially it's a middle manager role. I'm sort of squashed in between the faculty and the leadership administration of Baylor. But I think I like to say, and others say this, that it's the one of the most important roles in a university is the department chair because that kind of lower level supervisor is so critical in the lives of the employees of the university, right? And we all know that. And so I have the joyful role of being able to support my faculty and staff in my department in a real daily way that higher level administration and executives are not able to reach. And so I'm very thankful for that role, and I've just loved it for the last 4 years.
Now, you have like a PhD in organizational development. Did did you require any like management or leadership training as you were stepping into the department chair role?
I will say, universities can do this better, and they can learn from the business world in terms of leadership development, right? So there's not a lot of leadership development for administrative roles in higher education. I'm working to change that at Baylor, at least. I'm thankful to have been appointed by our provost to run a leadership development
Oh,
a
great.
program to train our new department chairs across campus, and
Oh,
that's
great.
really great work that I get to do. I mean, it's fun in this role, right? Because I get to live out what I have researched and taught for 14 years. With my PhD and my research in leadership and psychology. My PhD is in industrial organizational psychology. So,
That's right.
so being able to study people and now being able to really live out what I've studied is really a blessing and brings me just so much satisfaction to be able to really practice those things that I have learned about as a student and as a scholar. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I totally mixed that all around. It's psychology that you have your PhD
Psychology
in.
is part of my identity, it's really a strong part of who I am and what I bring to, both the classroom and to my role as a leader.
Now, did you always want to go into higher education? Because it's a big commitment to go get your PhD.
Yes, in I'm kind of unusual. In 8th grade, I decided I wanted to go into psychology, and have never strayed from that path. And then I think my parents, I think, um, sort of raised me to be committed to college. And I knew that I just wanted the highest level of education possible. I loved school growing up and I loved college, and I just never wanted to leave the college campus environment. So I think that's why not only did I get the PhD, but I also stayed as a faculty member, because I love the like excitement and engagement of this like learning environment. Just kind of being immersed in it all the time, being around people who love to learn and to study and research things is just very stimulating.
So I imagine being around 18 to 22-year olds keeps you young.
Keeps you very young. They're always going through that same cycle of like, thinking about and dreaming about their first job, and then, going through the cycle of getting engaged and getting married, and it's just like over and over again. So
Yeah.
it's wonderful. It's wonderful to kind of stay in that joyful period of youth as a faculty member. And of course, I feel a little older every year, but I try to stay young.
Really excited to dig in a little bit on your unique leadership puzzle. Do you do a lot of research within leadership and management? Is there any particular leadership characteristic that you feel has allowed you to be successful in higher education? Maybe said another way is, what has allowed you to take on new challenges and achieve what you've achieved so far?
So I think going back to that identity in psychology, I think that I just have a real love and passion for people, for understanding um, how people think and act, and why, and what is their story. And I think that love for people has really just driven me to not only want to teach and research, but really want to lead people in a way that comes from a more of a servant mindset of how can I serve you and how can I support you, and how can I help you achieve your goals and your dreams. And um, it's really that's very just it just comes back to just wanting to get to know people around me, and wanting to know how I can help serve them. So it's really nothing complex, even though people are extremely complex and there's a lot of challenges, right, in leading people, and building relationships with people can be very challenging. But I see each one of those challenges as an opportunity to get to know a person better and to find their value and their contribution, even when sometimes that's hard to see.
Yeah. I imagine that it is can be really challenging in the classroom setting when you have a student that is underperforming. Um, how do you deal with that, right? I mean, in the business world,
Mhm.
leaders would take certain actions. In the higher education space, how do
Mhm.
you how do you lead a student to actually want to learn and be the best that they can be while they're in your class?
Yeah, I think one beautiful part about teaching students is getting to know them. I think the challenge arises is when students, for various reasons, don't open up. And so, certainly, it's on the professor to create a culture and a class environment where that open sharing and transparency starts with the professor, right? Being authentic and being who I am and sharing who I am as a child of God, who I am as a person, as a leader, to kind of open up that conversation and that relationship. And then to build those one on one relationships with students. And so the hardest part with students, I find, is when they don't seek me out and they don't come to me and communicate about things that are happening. Because oftentimes, right, there's some other obstacle that is impeding their ability to be successful in class.
Right.
And if they're not open about what that obstacle is, not that I need to know all the details, But if they're not communicating with me about an obstacle, then I can't help support them. And so I try to, give that message to students. I try to make myself available and approachable to the extent that I can. It's always hard when you have a student at the end of the semester who has not been successful in class and then comes to you and shares right about something that's been going on in their life. And I just always think, oh, if I'd only known, I could have supported you and I could have been flexible and we could have worked together. And I'm sure that same thing happens with employees. I mean, I know in my workplace in higher education, right? I can't help support an employee if they are not letting me know what is going on. And so I try to do the same thing with my 24 faculty and 3 staff members, that I try to build relationships and build open communication and facilitate lots of ways and opportunities for them to come to me when they need support.
Yeah, it's amazing how there are a lot of similarities. Now, obviously, if someone's working for you, if they're not delivering on what they need to, then there's consequences,
Mm.
potentially upwards to losing their job. I guess the consequence on the student side is, yeah, they
Mhm.
drop a class or they have to retake it.
Which might make them lose a job. Sometimes job offers are contingent upon GPA when they graduate. I've had
Right?
students come to me and beg for a grade because they're gonna lose an offer.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's it is always good to remember that not putting in the work or not seeking the help when help is offered, um, those consequences are going to be playing out one way or the other.
So I think we're training our students, right? We're training them to seek out help and support and mentorship and resources. That is going to be the same strategy in the workplace when they enter the workforce. But I also really believe that it's on the leader, right, to set that culture and um, to allow for that open communication so that employees or students feel comfortable coming to the leader, because and there's a lot of ways that leaders can make that a difficult, a challenging
Right.
thing to communicate about,
Yeah.
family issues, things outside of work that may seem like taboo or not acceptable. We don't talk about those sort of things here.
Yeah.
And if that's the culture, then it's a lot harder for a
Right.
supervisor to support their employees.
Yeah. No, that's right. Which I think goes to the term that you used a little bit earlier about servant leadership.
Hmm.
Um, I know that is a passion of yours, you've recently published an article or two about servant leadership. Can
Yeah.
you
So
tell us? Go ahead.
sure. Servant leadership is one of my research areas, one of my favorite things to study. And honestly, what I promote in working with undergraduates or graduate students, I truly believe in this model that Christ gave us, in the way that Christ taught us to lead, which is very personal and is very focused on the people around us. So, a servant leader is just someone who puts others first before themselves. So, putting the needs of your subordinates, your direct reports, before your own needs as a leader. It's pretty much simple as that, but challenging in practice, right? To really live that out. And so I think what I love about studying servant leadership is that the research, now there are hundreds and hundreds of decades of articles on servant leadership that all point to the success of this model, the real tangible, bottom line outcomes of servant leaders. A leadership strategy, a style that might seem on the surface, too soft, too whatever.
Yeah.
But we can show that there are tangible financial results, HR, employee results in terms of job satisfaction and low turnover and culture and all of the things that organizations want. Servant leaders are able to achieve, and it's because they put the people first, and really focus on the needs, the very specific and changing needs of the people, the workforce in their organization.
Well, yeah, I think the studies say that most people leave managers; they don't leave companies, and so this idea of a leader, serving the employee would help to keep people from being upset with the manager enough to leave.
Absolutely. So it makes so much sense to us, but you see organizations over and over again failing in promoting those leadership behaviors, especially of their lower level managers, supervisors. Those behaviors that are really servant focused. We often get too caught up in the bottom line mentality and other goals, and we don't develop our leaders to help foster these kinds of other centered behaviors, right? Or what we could develop these behaviors because we know that they can be fostered in anyone, or we could select people who have that natural tendency and that desire to serve others, select them into leadership roles. When we see in research, when that is the focus, and when leaders are promoted that have this servant mindset, that is effective for the organization. And one of our recent papers also found, looking across studies all around the world, that actually servant leadership is universal across cultures as well, that it's effective in many different cultures that it's been studied in. So it's not just an American thing or an Anglo thing. But we found when the culture of the country, when the culture is more congruent with this servant mindset of putting others first and people focused, that those servant behaviors are even further more effective. So that there is kind of this fit, enhancement of the
Sure.
culture around us too.
Yeah. Oh, nice, nice. Yeah, I remember a time when I was over in India and I was doing some leadership training, and one of the employees who's Hindu said, "Hey, I tell me about this servant leadership thing," and so that was it was fun to be able to share because obviously India is very a servant oriented kind of culture, so
Mhm.
it was fun to
Absolutely.
bring that
Hmm.
that leadership style to them. Over the years, it seems like different leadership styles have become the norm of things, right? I mean, there was situational leadership and
Hmm.
agile leadership and authentic leadership, and
Hmm.
now we have inclusive leadership. How do you think, servant leadership kind of plays with any of that? Are they all kind of just saying the same thing using new pithy words?
Yeah, I think that that's something that we discuss a lot in our research literature, right? What is different here? What is new? Why do we need another style of leadership? I think that that's a valid discussion. And I do think that the leadership research, or maybe you could say the leadership, conversation more broadly, suffers in particular from too many of these terms and too much differentiation. So there is a movement in the leadership research towards simplifying and finding the overall theme. So what is the driving theme, the trend across all of these leadership styles? But I still find value in servant leadership. I mean, I tend to think that servant leadership goes back to Christ and to the way that, he led us 2,000 years
Right.
ago. So it's not new, even though Robert Greenleaf made it more hot and popular, right? It's really a very old, classic concept. And I think that there's a lot of value in this mentality, this mindset of putting others first. It shares similarities with authentic leadership, ethical leadership, the others that you mentioned. But the research does show that it has different and distinctive effectiveness.
Yeah. Interesting. I've done uh, I've tried doing a little bit of research, and I've kind of gone back to, we'll call it the 20s, early 1920s, and the whole Hawthorne project, and looking back, and I can't find any radically different leadership principles, at least for the last 100 years, even though they're called different things.
Hmm. Hmm.
Which I think you've just answered that question, at least in the research and academic circles. That's probably a fair statement.
Yep, yep. I think that's right. I think it's pretty classic, and There's a long line of great leaders throughout our history that we can point back to as servant leaders. We just didn't always have that term, that name for it.
Yeah. Right. Right. But I know the servant leadership is not the only research that you're passionate about. I'm really interested in digging in a little bit on, I think you call it work family conflicts. I think out in the business world, it might be work life effectiveness or work life balance.
Hmm.
Um, can you,
Talk
can
about
you,
a bunch of different concepts too for the same thing. Yep.
exactly.
Hmm.
So, talk to us a little bit about what you're learning in your research and what our listeners can,
Hmm.
grasp from this idea that there is a work and there is a family,
Hmm.
and
Or
there's
life.
always going to be in a life and there's going to
Yeah.
be conflict in that. So,
Yep.
yeah,
So I don't think that research area is divorced from my research on servant leadership or my background in psychology, right? This is all related. So I'm drawn to research on work and life integration because I'm a mom and I'm a wife and I'm a sister and I'm a daughter. And, that is a part of my life and my daily struggle, right? With how all of that integrates into my work life. And so I really want to help support employees and leaders and the ways that they balance all of that. And balance is not a great word, right? Because it's never really a perfect balance.
right,
But what I see from a leadership standpoint, right, is the value in helping employees to integrate their work and their life. And we call it family supportive supervisor behavior. So, supervisors who are supporting employees as members of their family and supporting their life outside of work. And that's, I think, critical. So when I work with my staff member who supports me daily and is so supportive of our entire department, when I talk with her every day and we pray every morning, she lets me know about things going on in her life. And I love learning about what's going on, at home. And I want to support what is happening in her life. And so, flexibility for time off and working from home, um, understanding if, she needs to do something during the workday, like just understanding that she's a real person and that
yeah,
she's got other things going on and other than the
right,
work.
right,
And so that's related, I think, to being a servant leader and putting others before yourself is knowing what's going on in their families and the joys too, sharing and celebrating in the joys as well.
yeah. Um, do do you see anything in your research where this conflict is exacerbated with the work from home movement and trends since COVID, right? I mean,
Hmm.
um, uh,
Yeah. So I think that working from home, I think we're all learning more about boundary management, right? And that's what the research has been discussing from a theoretical perspective for a long time, but as we all know, is really challenging in practice. I mean, I know I personally struggle with setting really clear boundaries between work and family. And we know that actually people differ in the extent to which they prefer certain boundaries. So, my boundaries, I prefer very porous boundaries, right? Lots of holes. I like to kind of be a mom and a wife during my workday. So I'm doing things or I'm texting or I'm managing family demands at work. And then the same thing at home. I let some of that work life bleed into my home life because I'm trying to be excellent and I'm trying to support. And sometimes that just doesn't really fit into the 8 to 5.
yeah,
But I'm always working, right, to still maintain some boundaries. So, what that looks like for me is priorities. So, for me, family comes first. And so, trying to set my boundaries around priorities. So, at some point, the work day ends because I got to go pick up my kids from school and take them somewhere. And
right,
that's okay. The work will still be there tomorrow morning. And so that's a real challenge. But what we know from the research around work family integration is that there's conflict, but there's also enrichment. So there's a
okay,
positive side to this. And this is why, leaders should really help support the whole person of the employee because the family life enriches a person in their work role. It provides them with skills. Think about parenting, all the skills that we learn, all the patience that we learn that we can bring into our work role. And the same thing, our work role and the skills and the relationships we're building at work can help us in our family roles. And so there's enrichment both ways between those domains. And a good leader who really supports their employees as a family member as well helps really increase that enrichment. And our research shows that that enrichment actually leads to better satisfaction of employees. So someone's more satisfied with their job if their job is helping to enrich their family life.
Okay.
So if they're building a network of relationships at work, people that are not only maybe mentors in their work role, but maybe they're great examples of a great mom or a great dad, and they're supporting, that person to be a great mom and a great dad. That enrichment of the family helps me be more satisfied with my job and want to stay there. And so supporting both of those domains is going to ultimately lead to more satisfied employees.
Um, now, you have a recent article that talks about micro breaks as part of that family interaction. Is that
Yes.
really helping from especially those who are working from home, where they can have these short interactions with family members while they're working?
Yeah, thanks. I was just about to say that and I lost my train of thought. So I'm also really interested with all these interruptions that this breeds, right? When you're working from home and you're in the family space, or even if you're not in the family space, all the interruptions that technology can bring us. And um, I have found, and much research supports the value and the benefits of breaks. And I am always trying to promote the message that organizations and supervisors should support employee breaks and the autonomy to break when and how you need to, and to do things that you prefer to do on that break. And yeah, micro breaks is a really good term for it. It can be a very short break. So when people hear the term break, they tend to think about an hour lunch break. But what our research supports is actually more like a model of like hydration. You want to stay hydrated throughout the day. You don't want to like only drink water at the lunch break. You want to be drinking water all throughout the day, just like you should be taking small, short breaks throughout the day to not be burnt out and exhausted and depleted of resources. And so, some of those breaks might be family interactions. And so, we have a study about those family, let's say maybe interruptions, or the times when the break is either meeting a family demand or interacting with a family member. And actually those breaks of interacting with your family can be very enriching and very replenishing, but we found it's more helpful if those breaks are enjoyable. So it kind of depends on how much you enjoy them. So like if it's paying bills or some sort of like stressful demand or stressful family interaction, then that's not going to be as replenishing as a positive conversation with your spouse during the workday is enjoyable and replenishing.
Now, has your research shown like an optimal break, like take 10 minutes every hour or 15 minutes every 2 hours? What is the research showing that might be kind of optimal to keep that energy going for the employee?
Yeah, I love that question, and I get it often from journalists who cover my research, and I don't have a good answer. We have tried to break the data down in multiple data collections, and I think it's because there's no one answer for every person. I think it just depends. And so that strategy of lots of short breaks throughout the day is a really good one that's universal across people we found, but there's no magic number in
Okay.
terms of how long your break should be. And if you see in the media, if you see a news article about a magic number of how long your coffee break should be, then maybe, take that with a grain of salt.
Got it. Got it. Just like people are different, everyone needs a little bit different
Yeah,
kind of break. It makes sense to
that's
me.
right. That's right. So it's really about what works for you and what you find replenishing. So part of it's awareness, right?
Okay.
Finding a way to really become more aware of your breaking strategy, which sometimes that awareness you might realize how little you break. There are certainly days, and I'm a breaks researcher, and I do find myself reflecting back on my day and thinking, wow, I don't know if I took a single break. And so just kind of being mindful, right? Increasing that mindfulness of how you're working.
Oh, yeah. There's certainly days where I look up and it's like, oh, did I have lunch?
Yes, yes. I'm usually like, I like to eat, so I usually don't forget to eat. That's one thing. I don't skip a meal.
Every leader has had some form of aha moment that kind of shapes their who they are as a leader.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's a boss that yells at them, sometimes it's something else. But can can you point to any kind of pivotal event or
Mhm.
activity in your career that's really shaped you to being the leader that you are of a department, 24 people, classrooms?
Sure, and maybe this is a common answer these days. I hear a lot of our guest speakers at Baylor refer to this, but the pandemic, right, was really pivotal in a lot of our lives. And I started as department chair in 2020 summer. So, I knew I was going to come into the role a few months before that. I probably knew I was coming into the role before the shutdown, but that was a really challenging time to be promoted into a leadership role, becoming leader of my previous peers, right? Of faculty that I had previously worked with as peers, and stepping into a role that I had never done before. I had never led at work formally. And so it really changed my perspective in terms of how to lead during the pandemic, whereas I probably would have been a very different leader if it wasn't the pandemic. So we were that summer, of course, we none of us in the office, so we were all at home. But at Baylor, we were preparing for in the fall, we did go back to some in person classes. So Baylor went pretty quickly into face to face with masks,
Right.
and then, of course, maintained some online classes. But we were, for the most part, pretty remote. And so the first thing I wanted to do as a leader was I wanted to hold a retreat. I had in my mind this beautiful retreat day at some sort of off-site location where we would all come together and worship and get to know one another. And of course, that couldn't happen, so I had to reimagine that. And what I decided to do on our retreat Zoom call, which had lots of breaks, I decided to focus on um, our mission at Baylor, which is to be a preeminent Christian university. And our Christian mission drives everything that we do at Baylor. And so I decided to go back to the core, right? In that moment of stress and anxiety, to just go back to who we are and why we're here. Um, and we just focused on our faith stories. We got to know each other as followers of Christ, and in that moment, we discussed how we could come together as a department, even when we couldn't be physically located together, and how we could support one another. And so that was the focus of that first retreat. And I've done the retreat ever since, and it's been a really core staple of our culture and our department. Um, Jeff's had a chance to join our retreat, but I think each of those retreats is shaped because of that first one and the way that the pandemic sort of taught us to come together more intentionally than before.
Right. Nice. Yeah, you mentioned one thing that I don't want to overlook. You were working with all of these other faculty and staff for a number of years before you moved into uh, the chair position, department
Mhm.
chair. How was that transition? Was any tips or tricks that you used to help maintain those relationships, even though the relationship changed from peer to kind of manager employee, if you will?
Yeah. I've thought a lot about that, and I don't think I have all the answers. I think I'm still growing and developing in how I'm managing that transition. But I will say what I've tried to do the best that I can is to still maintain kind of an informal friendship with the people that I manage. What that looks like in practice is not perfect, but I want to have relationships outside of work with the people that I work with, and I what I do is I open that up to everyone so that I'm equal and balanced and not playing favorites. I mean, I want to hang out with everyone outside of work. And so it's just a matter of who takes me up on that and, who seeks that out for me. But I enjoy a friendship with the people that I work with. And I know I have supervisory, responsibilities, and that dynamic has certainly changed. But I don't think that it prevents me from having a close relationship
Sure.
with the people that I lead. And so, in some ways, it's strange and it was awkward at first to lead more senior faculty who were my mentors and even my former manager. Right, that's always an awkward thing. But I'm thankful for the trust that they have always placed in me, and for their empowering me to
Yeah.
be a good leader and supporting me in that. So that made it a lot easier.
Um, you know, uh, because you're in higher education, you're teaching. You've been teaching millennials, Gen Zs, and you
Mm,
can
mhm.
you can uh, just listen to the news about what people think about those generations. But they are our next. They're the next generation of leaders out in the business world. Can you share your viewpoint on why you're optimistic about the future and these future leaders?
I'm very optimistic. We have, I'm most familiar with students at Baylor, but we have some amazing potential future leaders, students at Baylor. I get to faculty advise our Women in Business student organization. And this is an incredible organization that's been around for over a decade of young women. There are, I believe, 19 student officers that lead a group of over 300 young women, a lot of freshmen and sophomore business majors. And they run service events and professional speaker events and social events, all the things. And I'm just so incredibly in awe of these leaders. These student officers are driven, they are entrepreneurial and creative. They are bringing new ideas and a creative spirit to what they do, and such dedication and commitment to this organization and to its members. That I'm very inspired and optimistic about future leaders and organizations, because I know that each one of them is going to make their mark on the workplace. And I see, especially at Baylor, and I think maybe we foster this more than other environments, but I see such a strong sense of identity in these young people and a strong sense of their values. So many of them know their values and are committed to living those out
Nice.
in beautiful ways. And so I love that we are sending young people out into the workforce that have a sense of values, that are looking for a work environment that fits those values, and are looking to live, ethically and purposefully,
Right.
and be good examples for that in the workplace.
Anything that you can share with our listeners who are listener base are C-suite leaders, senior leaders. How can they harness the power of this next generation of leaders? So someone
Mhm.
graduates. How can they best support them?
It's a great question. I think our young people today want to be empowered and not held back in terms of ideas and autonomy, but they also need guidance and mentoring, right? So they need to learn how to fail, and they need to have someone there to help mentor them through failure. But they need to be able to fail, right? They need to be able to take risks and to experience that failure. And I think they're ready for that. I mean, so many of these college students have already run a business or two or three before, they come to Baylor. Like, just the amount of experience and trial and error that they're bringing is so great. And so good mentorship, I think, is so critical, and a two-way mentoring relationship, coaching relationship is so helpful and important. And I think that that's what they're seeking. That's what they're wanting from
Yeah,
a workplace that they'll want to stay at.
got it.
give them the opportunity to try and fail and be there to help pick them back up when they do. There are a lot of C-suite leaders that I interact with that want to help teach or adjunct or be a guest lecturer at a university and kind of give back. They hit a certain point in their career and they go, "Oh, I'd like to be able to do that." Do you have any advice to someone who might like to get engaged with their alma mater or local university on what could they do to open that door so they can get a little bit of
Yeah,
teaching?
I love this question, Jeff, because I'm so thankful for someone like you and your experience that you bring into our classroom as an adjunct. And I would say, I think this is a true statement that all business schools rely upon adjunct or part time teachers to bring that wealth of business knowledge, that current business experience into the classroom, in addition to full time faculty who are sometimes also engaged in business. But I think that a lot of business schools have opportunities to teach part time one class, which is a lot of work, as you could probably attest to, but it's so rewarding. And it's usually a limited, maybe 3 hours a week on like a 1 day evening, or it might even be online. Um, I think it's actually probably easier than people think to find those opportunities, and really it's about relationship building like everything else. So what happens with me, and just pulling back the curtain, is that people email me as the department chair in the discipline that they want to teach in. They email me, maybe send a resume and express their desire, and then if we have a need, I'll set up a meeting and I'll get to know them and I'll learn if there's a good fit there. It's often not a complicated hiring process for part-time and adjuncts. It's more about what is the need, what are the openings, but this kind of work is often filling needs, which are sometimes last minute teaching needs. So maybe we have more student demand than we expected, we need another section of a class. So I'll have a need last minute, or maybe, a faculty is on leave or various reasons why we'll need a class covered. And so I would encourage, people with professional experience who are interested in giving back and teaching to reach out and talk to a department chair at a local college and learn more about what the opportunities are and what that looks like. Just make your desire known so that when a need comes up, they can call upon you if they have that need come up. And you don't need you do need a master's degree, but you don't need a PhD. I think that there's an assumption a lot of times that, I have to seek a PhD, a highest degree, in order to teach in the classroom. But as a part-time lecturer, and then we often have these clinical or lecturer full-time roles even that are usually master's level. So in a business school, usually for accreditation, you do need a master's degree, but that's usually it. So like an MBA or some other related master's is enough. Education, it's a lot more about the professional experience that you bring in terms of qualifications.
And if you're not sure if you want to do a whole class, then you can certainly build that relationship and go and just go to a single class where you can teach or lead a
Great
case
point.
study.
Yes, yes. Guest speaking is always a need, and it's a fun way to give back and super low time commitment. But you get to meet the students and you get to bring, share your stories. And so professors often like to bring in guest speakers. So that could be a relationship you build with any faculty member at the university, to offer yourself as a guest speaker. And those are always a lot of fun.
Which is how I got started. And I've actually hired a couple of students that, when I was a guest speaker years later, remembered me and ended up hiring them. So that
That's
was
great. We love that.
all right. Well, now is time for a little bit of fun. We're going to do a lightning round.
Okay,
Uh,
let's do it.
all right. So I know you teach negotiation classes. You take students over to Morocco. So what's your favorite thing about Morocco?
Yep, I'm going back to Morocco in about a month with 22 students on study abroad. My favorite thing about Morocco, especially Marrakesh, is that it smells like oranges. There is just
Okay.
it's a full sensory experience, and there's just this smell of oranges in the air all the time. And there's orange trees everywhere, and it's just so beautiful and sensory.
Oh,
great. All right, if you had one superpower, what would it be?
Okay, so I'm interpreting this question as if you think, do I have a current superpower? So I would say my current superpower, if I had to name one, is I run a really efficient meeting. Like I have meeting superpowers that you would not believe. And when I'm in other meetings that I'm not leading, I'm often frustrated, but I can run a super efficient meeting.
What is the best meal you've ever had in your life?
I am going to praise my husband who makes the best steak. And so a good steak dinner is all I need. It is delicious and it rivals the best steak restaurants.
What is the most exciting place you've ever traveled?
So I think my favorite place in the world is Barcelona, Spain, which I'll also be going to with our students in a month. I've been there twice, and this will be my third time. And I just love the culture in Barcelona.
If you were to describe your unique leadership puzzle piece that you bring to your team, what would that be?
I'm a closer. So I am great at finishing a project, bringing a project over the finish line. And that's also an important leadership trait. You know, we talked about lots of other things about people, but man, with tasks, I am very good at actually completing a project, which I am sometimes wondering why so few people like to do that.
Yeah,
But I am one of them. So I will get that project done.
that could also be a superpower.
Maybe.
All right, what do you think your staff would say your unique puzzle piece is?
I think that they would probably talk about my approachableness and my relationship building. I think that that's what I hear other people praise about me here at Baylor, and also can be unique, right? So I find that people are often drawn to that in my leadership style. I build relationships and I care about my people, and that's important to me.
I know you're doing some research. Any research that you want to highlight before we get to our last question?
Sure. So you mentioned that I teach a course on negotiating. I didn't talk about that at all. I guess I do a lot of things. So I am doing some research focused on negotiation strategies, and I have a paper right now I'm working on. I'm really interested in this idea, especially in salary negotiations. Where we can often be faced as a negotiator with a very small little minute micro counter offer from the other side. And it's like, what do you do in that moment? It's sort of like a surprise sometimes comes to you as a shock. And so how do you respond as a negotiator? And so we're looking at strategies negotiators can use to respond to just a very, very small, just a couple $100 concession in a salary offer, and the ways that they can get more creative and be really focused on their goals. So a good negotiator negotiating salary, that's a whole other podcast, I guess, can really focus in on what is my ultimate goal and how do I persistently, creatively try to achieve it. And so we're doing some research, and it's fun now for me to marry what I've been teaching for 14 years at Baylor and negotiating, and now actually doing some research with it.
Salary negotiations, it was the bane of my existence for myself. It's really hard to do. So I'll really look forward to seeing you. Well, thanks, Emily. This has been great. I have one last question for you, then I'll let you go. What advice would you give our listeners on implementing their own personal leadership strategy so that they can grow their own capabilities, whether it's a team of 5 or 500?
So I think maybe to sum up what I've been saying today and what I'm passionate about is it's as simple as leaders should just focus on the people around you, really get to know the stories and the family life, and everything going on with the people that you work with, whether that's your employees, your direct reports, whether that's your top leadership or leaders right above you, whether that's the janitorial staff or the security guard. Just getting to know the people around you, what motivates them, what do they need and want out of life, and how can you help support them in that? And I think it's really as simple as that, but it takes time, right? It takes effort and intention and time, but it's so rewarding, not only to you as a leader. I mean, just to be able to get to know the people around you and share life with them. But it's also really rewarding in terms of the culture you can create and the success that you can have as a business because you're supporting the people in that business.
Yeah. Well, Emily, this was, thank you so much for that. This was amazing. Thanks for coming on the Leadership Puzzle, and hopefully you'll come back. Thanks again. Have a great day.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Really loved it.
Oh, I really enjoyed having Emily on our show today. Her research on microbreaks was really fascinating and valuable to any leader who needs to understand how to get the most out of their time at work. You can also find us on all the social platforms at The Leadership Puzzle. Join us next time when we sit down with Mike Moreland, the former SVP and CHRO of Providence Health Systems.